What's up, everybody? Good late afternoon or early evening for some of you. We're almost done with Wild Card Weekend here in the NFL. It was not exactly the most entertaining of Wild Card weekends, but there were some pretty good results actually. We got one game left coming up in a few minutes here, and we also have some information about who the Seahawks are initially looking at to be their next head coach. So I want to be very clear here. I don't expect the Seahawks to hire anybody for quite some time. It's probably going to be at least a couple of weeks. These teams that have coordinators or positional coaches or whatever that we might want, um, some of them are probably not even going to be interested in interviewing until after they're eliminated or after they win the Super Bowl. So it's going to take a while for us to get through our process here, and there's nothing wrong with that. The longer we take, I would think, the better. As long as we don't take so long that we get into like free agency before we have a head coach, it doesn't really matter that much. And of course, to a certain extent, maybe if you snooze, you lose. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking some time here, understanding that it could be almost a month before you're able to interview with a guy like Mike McDonald. So if that's the case, you got to just wait it out. Now, speaking of Mike McDonald, I do want to talk about some of the guys that we've requested interviews with. This is how the process works. You have these coaches that are part of current coaching staffs who you have to request to interview with if they're currently still with a team. There are going to be some guys that we maybe look at who you don't have to request with, like say Mike Vrabel, because he's not on a team. But there is a process you have to go through to interview with these guys. So I want to look at the initial six guys that we are currently interviewing with, or excuse me, requesting to interview with. It is possible, by the way, a request can get denied. The Panthers are trying to protect some of their guys right now. Don't know how successful they're going to be. You can't exactly hold a coordinator hostage when they get offered a better job, or a job that they want more anyway. But I just want to talk about the six guys that the Seahawks are looking at right now. We're going to start with this. This is a couple days old. This was said, I think, on Saturday by Field Goals on X. Dan Quinn, of course, he was our first guy that we were requesting an interview with, which makes sense. And I know people are very much cooled off on the Dan Quinn stuff after what happened yesterday with the Cowboys, but I don't think we can completely dismiss him just because of one really bad game. When, by the way, I mean, not that this instills confidence in me, maybe he was already mentally checked out there. Like I'm not defending him if this is what happened because it's a pretty crappy thing to do. Maybe in his mind he was already like, I'm out of here, so I don't care what happens in the playoffs. And maybe his players were like, well, our defensive coordinator is going to be out of here after this postseason run, so we're checked out too. Like there are things going on with Dan Quinn regarding yesterday that might be beyond the simple analysis of, well, the defense sucked, so he sucked, and he sucks because he sucked, and that's all there is to it. The other interview we requested with was Mike McDonald. So both these guys I've already done candidate profiles on previous videos last few days. You can go look at those videos if you want to, but Mike McDonald would be amazing. And obviously his team is still very much in the playoffs, so we may not be able to go through that interview process for a little while. But Mike McDonald is a very appealing candidate, I think. So those were our two initial requests, two defensive guys. And in the last handful of hours, we've actually gotten news on several other guys we've requested interviews with from Pelissero, I think is actually how you pronounce it. Somebody told me on YouTube in the comments that it's not Pelissero, it's Pelissero, I think. So we got a couple of tidbits from him. We have requested an interview with the Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith. So this is a guy I'm going to have to make a profile on in the coming days. Obviously, he was part of that really impressive Miami offense this year under Mike McDaniel. Now, how much he had to do with it is anyone's guess when you're working under a guy like Mike McDaniel who knows what you're doing. But this is going to be an interesting guy going forward. I'm on board with the concept. There may be some guys I like more, but Frank Smith is not a bad idea. Also, from Pelissero, we have a request to interview Elijio Elijah Evero is, I believe, how it's pronounced. This guy's really interesting, but he's coming off a terrible year in Carolina, but I don't think any smart person would say that's his fault, right? He's working under Tepper, one of the worst owners in the league. It's a complete train wreck in Carolina. He's an absolute disaster all the way around, and I don't think people are holding Carolina's defensive performance this year against him. He was hamstrung by the worst offense in the league, just a terrible, terrible team. And he's had success before. He was part of the Rams team that won the Super Bowl. He was the defensive coordinator on the Broncos 2 years ago. That defense that was really, really good, despite having the worst offense in the league with Hackett and Russell Wilson. So Evero's going to be very interesting as a potential head coaching candidate. I don't know if he gets up that high now, but it's an idea. Then we got some theme from Adam Schefter earlier today. We have requested a head coaching interview with Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris per a source. Raheem Morris is a guy who's been around a while. He's mostly been involved with the Tampa Bay team. Some actually pretty good defenses on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the going all the way back to the John Gruden days. The thing with Raheem Morris is he already failed out as a head coach. He was the head coach of Tampa Bay for 3 years. It was awful. He got fired. And since then, he's done some impressive things. Like he was obviously he's been part of the Rams defensive coaching staff for the last 3 years. A defense that has been overall pretty decent and won a Super Bowl and made the playoffs this year. So Raheem Morris is definitely going to be an interesting one. It's a little bit on the duller side, admittedly, but Raheem Morris has a good resume, and I do believe that at the end of the day, it would be I understand the idea of going after a defensive coach as much as I don't really like it, because our defense is the side of the ball that needs to be improved, and the offense is the side of the ball that's actually pretty decent. So I understand that philosophy. I understand that idea. Raheem Morris is not one of my favorites, but I do think that he's at least a credible candidate with a pretty good amount in his resume that you like. And we'll make a video about this guy in the coming days as well. Same with Evero. And Schefter hits us with one more, and this one's really interesting. Giants offensive coordinator Mike Kafka. And I know you're thinking like, oh, the Giants offensive coordinator? No, hell no. But this guy's interesting. This guy was learning under Andy Reid for 5 years in Kansas City, and I think he was there for a little bit with him in Philly, and then he went over with Brian DeBole to New York. And remember, Brian DeBole and the Giants offense had decent success in 2022, and then everything fell apart in 2023. So it's not like everything he's been a part of has been bad. This is an Andy Reid disciple. This is a guy who I really liked as an offensive coordinator hired 2 years ago when we, or excuse me, 3 years ago when we got Waldron. Kafka was near the top of my list that year, I remember, along with guys like Waldron. And if he, I don't know if he's done enough over the last 3 years to get a head coaching job compared to somebody like even a Shane Waldron. But Kafka's interesting because this is another guy who could be one of those offensive super geniuses. And if you get him and he's good, you're going to be riding nice and easy for a long time because he's so young. So those are the 6 guys that we've requested interviews with so far. 2 offensive guys, 4 defensive guys. Let me know what you think about this crop. I like some of them. Some of them I like a little bit less. But at the end of the day, I'm just happy to have something different.